We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. MorningLine, not Sportsline, but this is Steve Layman. And we just could not have a show this morning about the Predators. Now, I know some of you, may not have watched it. Yeah, not everyone. It's hard to believe as much as you see all this. You think all of Nashville, and I hope all of Nashville's behind the Preds.
Yeah.
Some people maybe because they don't know the sport as well. I remember when we first got the Predators, Steve, I thought, all right, again, it's another one of these southern cities that's getting a hockey team. It wasn't the first choice by the person who brought a tenant to the arena. They wanted NBA.
Right.
But that didn't work out because the Grizzlies were already here, and they settled on I say settled because that's what it was at the time, hockey. But now I agree with you. This town has always had a wonderful core support of the Preds. And I think this run now is going to bring a whole legion of new fans. And I think certainly it's here to stay. There were times, remember we came close at one point where we were worried the Predators were going to leave.
2007, they were on the way out the door basically to Hamilton, Ontario, when the local leadership group, ownership group led by Tom Sigaran stepped up and ensured the fact that they would stay here. Since then, they have run flawlessly. And they have become ingrained in this city. They are a fabric of this community.
With this now, they're part of it for good.
And I think a point that we really should make is when they first arrived, no one had any ties to this sport or this team around here. But now, if you think about it, they've played 18 seasons. They've essentially been here for 20 years. There was a lockout year. There was the year that they were getting ready at the beginning. You would have to find about a 25-year-old to find someone who remembers life in Nashville without the Predators at this point. And so while certainly our parents, and while our generation, things like that, remembers Nashville before the Preds, the newest generation doesn't. And so you have a whole group of fans now who've grown up with nothing but hockey and nothing but the Predators in this town. And now for about 10 years being a consistent winner that's consistently in the playoffs, that's why this town has gotten so far behind this team. They are really ingrained, and in some ways it's taken a long time. But in some ways, I think the journey for this team makes it all the much more sweeter. The Titans' magical run in year one at the Coliseum was awesome. But at the same time, it sort of didn't make anybody work for it. The fact that this team had to go from expansion to relevance to the playoffs for the first time to an owner trying to take them to Hamilton, Ontario, fight it off to stay here, then become a consistent playoff team, and now a legit Stanley Cup contender and into the Stanley Cup Final. That journey, I think, has taken a lot of people along for the ride, and it's why this is so special.
That's what's great. Paid their dues, and people who wrote it. Now, I just want to get a sense from you. How unusual, I'm trying to think of some of the other sports, the wild card teams, and every once in a while, most recently, I guess in the NFL, the Packers a few years back with Aaron Rodgers, they weren't the last team in. Were the Predators the last team into the playoffs, or the second to last team in? There was another 8 seed in the other conference. Which team was record-wise better?
The Preds had a better record than the 8 seed in the Eastern Conference, but that was the only team in the playoffs that they had a better record
16 teams make the playoffs.
Correct.
The Predators had the 15th best record, or worst record, however you want to put it. And here they are. And it seems like, to me, sometimes in hockey, more than some of these other sports, you're more likely, for whatever reason, to see an 8 seed maybe upset a 1 seed, or a 7 seed upset a 2 seed. Then in the NBA, it just never. You look at what the NBA is doing now. These playoffs have been great. The NBA, and I like the NBA too, but those playoffs have been awful.
Right.
I mean, the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors have just roared through it, hardly losing a game. The Predators, as a number 8 seed, are now in the final.
Yep. The NBA could have saved us all a lot of time if they just said, Cavs, Warriors, you guys go play like a best-of-15 series.
Right.
That would have been much more entertaining. I actually heard, this probably doesn't happen a lot on Open Line, I'm going to invoke the odds makers in Vegas. I actually heard one last night say that there is a greater chance for the last team in the playoffs in the NHL to win the Cup than the team with the 3rd best odds in the NBA going into the playoffs to win over the Warriors or the Cavaliers. That's just the level of parity.
Right.
The NHL has a salary cap that has basically prevented any juggernaut super teams like the Golden State Warriors, where you have a Steph Curry,
4 All-Stars,
Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, all those guys. You have a bunch of guys with max contracts on the same teams in the NBA. You don't have that in the NHL. You have to fit it all in under the salary cap. It means there's much more parity. The game itself is way more close. I mean, last night, for instance, the Ducks outshot the Preds 41-18. They outchanced them basically 2-1 and lost 6-3.
Right.
It's about capitalizing on your opportunities, and it's about, maybe more than anything, great goaltending. And during this run, the Predators have had the best goaltender on the planet in Pekka Rinne.
And that's what always seems to come into play. Some people may look and say, well, he gave up 3 goals. Okay, but then you look at how many shots he faced. I mean, there's just no question. He did an amazing job. So is he older for a goaltender?
He's 34. And
I mean, is that considered older? I know Dominic Hasek, who's one of the all-time greats, played till he was 40. Not for us. He played for many other teams.
Right.
But I mean,
and he led Buffalo on a great charge in the playoffs. The question about the Predators really coming into the year was, man, are they loaded line to line to line? This may be one of the most talented teams in the NHL, but at 34, how much does Pekka Rinne have left in the tank? And to think now, here we are, looking at the same guy playing better than anybody on the planet. He is truly the best goaltender in the world right now, leading his team to the Stanley Cup Final. It's a remarkable run, and you couldn't be happier for someone because he is the longest tenured Predator. He was a guy that they got in the 4th round back in, I think, 2004. Kind of found. They molded him through their system. It got him up through Milwaukee, got him to the big club. He became a superstar, and for a good 3 or 4 years, 2009 to 2012, he was pretty much the best goaltender in the world. The team didn't match him, and oftentimes in the playoffs, he would shine and be maybe...
He can only do so much.
He'd do what he did last night and give up 1 or 2 goals, and the Preds couldn't outscore that, and they'd lose in a playoff series. And then when the team started to turn the corner a couple years ago, he had a couple injuries, he had a bad illness one year, and people wondered what was left. So many minutes, so much time in that crease, what was left. And a big thing this year for the Preds is the revelation of UC Saros, their backup goaltender. Pekka, unfortunately, over the last several years, because they really didn't have a good backup, was playing close to 70 games a year during the regular season out of the 82. That's a ton for a goaltender. And I think when he got to the playoffs, he frankly was worn out. This year he didn't have to do that. He played more around the range of 60, upper 50s. He seemed to be much more fresh in this postseason, and he's been phenomenal.
I'm just wondering, you get to see this, and we can talk about what happens on the ice. I'm curious off the ice. I mean, what's he kind of like? I'm sure, I'm sure you're going to say he's a nice guy, but I've always heard from a lot of these sports folks that among all the sports that you go interview with, and there's a lot of egos and frankly a bunch of jerks, a lot of jerks. And I'm not asking you to name the jerks, but I've heard that in general, people say hockey players are some of the most accessible and easier to deal with, and I'm talking easier than baseball, football, or basketball. I'm not asking you to name jerks, but have you found that to be in your experience that hockey players tend to be a little more friendly, or is it blurred for you? I don't know.
First off, I would just say in my experience, more times than not, athletes are pretty good. They're pretty willing of their time. They're pretty willing to give back. So I would say,
come on, they got egos. I run into some of these guys, and frankly, some of them are clowns. I'm not talking about the hockey players. I say that's because they've been pampered all their life, and they don't like a tough question. And I have no tolerance for that crap. But I've heard that hockey players are really good about it.
Generally, yes. I think hockey players are
just friendly.
Are very accessible. They take a different demeanor off the ice than they do sometimes on the ice.
They seem so humble.
I will say about Pekka Rinne, he is truly, I won't just say he's a nice guy, he's the nicest guy
is he a humble
I think I've ever met.
Incredibly humble.
He's fiery. If he struggles, he's fiery. I've heard stories about him slamming things in the locker room and things like that after the game of a bat. You remember back actually probably Game 7 last year in the 2nd round, he got pulled when the team in front of him basically laid an egg in Game 7 against the Sharks after traveling back and forth Anaheim, San Jose, playing every other night for a month basically. They just ran out of gas and had nothing left. He gave up 4 goals and what ultimately was a 5-0 win. He got pulled. And when he got pulled, he smashed his stick over the goal. That was kind of the biggest outburst anyone had ever seen of Pekka, and it was emblematic of that night. I think that's in there. That's his fiery side. But when you talk to him off the ice, incredibly humble, incredibly giving of his time, accessible, just a really, really nice guy.
Nice guy.
And that makes his teammates, I think, appreciate him even more. He never wants to take the credit, so they always heap it on him.
Yeah.
And I think it makes them lay down in front of him. Austin Watson last night had 7 or 8 block shots. I mean,
that
talk
hurts,
about just every single
Think
time.
about it. You're laying down in front of a slap shot, giving it up for your body. There's no one tougher than hockey players either, is there? I know football is obviously a violent sport, but hockey, Mike, why don't they wear mouth guards?
Toughness. Toughness.
I know, but they don't have any teeth. Wouldn't you wear a mouth guard and protect your teeth?
They don't get the teeth fixed oftentimes either. First off, I know there were multiple guys last night who did get teeth fixed. Off the record, lots of guys did. That's how physical it was. But there's a couple guys on the team, Austin Watson being one of them, who has not had front teeth for as long as I can remember. That's just part of the shtick or part of the deal of being an enforcer in the NHL.
Yeah.
The thing that will happen, and Nashville's never quite had to go through this because you haven't had this long of a run. Whenever this ends, which now will be at the end of the Stanley Cup Final, however many games that goes, you will be stunned at the news that trickles out at what some of these guys are playing with. I mean, we got a taste the other day. Ryan Johansson finished Game 4. Yeah. He had emergency surgery within a couple hours after the game, which had he had not, he probably would have lost his leg.
Wow.
But
he stayed on there and finished the game with the injury.
Yeah, he had an acute compartment syndrome, which for those of you who don't know, that's when pressure builds up and essentially makes a limb of your body go numb.
And it's like blood.
It was in his thigh. Yeah, but blood was basically pooling, pressure was forming, and you know,
if it has nowhere to go, you're going to have a problem.
You're going to be in real trouble before long. He finished the game. Most people I know think this happened about the second period. He finished the game, was walking around in the locker room as if nothing was wrong afterwards. Somehow he felt something and the trainers checked him out and said, that's not right. They rushed him to the emergency room and had surgery. He's going to be fine. There's no nerve damage, none of that, which is great. But that's the type of thing you're talking about here. Concussions, you're talking about broken limbs, things like that. We're going to hear all about that as this
You always hear it like a soft tissue injury, whatever that means. All right, we'll take a break. It's interesting. Listen, we'll be back with more with Steve Layman as we talk about the historic win for the Predators last night. On to the Stanley Cup, and who, if you have an opinion, would be a better matchup for the Predators, since we still don't know who they're going to play. We'll be back right after this.